Welcome to Spirit School. I'm your mentor, Danielle Sarank, also known as the Squamish Medium. In this podcast, I share honestly all I have learned about the mediumship and spiritual development journey. My intention is to normalize these conversations, to make way for a more confident, clear, and connected wave of lightworkers, serving the world of spirit with an open and joyful soul. Welcome again to Spirit School. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Spirit School. I am so excited to be here today. Today is a surprise episode even for me. As you know, I have been starting this podcast series called Spirit School Sessions, and this was an unexpected surprise that came into my inbox. I had a past reading client reach out to me and just ask me if she could have 30 minutes of my time to answer questions that she has brewing up around starting her own podcast. And when I first read it, I was like, I only work with people in like longer term containers, and I have my podcasting course already. But then she posed the question at the end saying, maybe you could use this for your podcast, because I'm sure that the questions I have other people want to know. And since I have been very intentionally living from a place of desire in these past few months, a future podcast episode on that later, I had a lit up moment and I was like, this girl's smart. And so I messaged her on Instagram because I know her on Instagram. And I said, you know what? You really intrigued me with this idea. Let's do it. Let's see what happens. And I didn't know her questions in advance. So what you hear is us in conversation, and it's a coaching call. And so people on my Instagram, I just did a 45-minute Instagram live. You can catch it if you're interested on IGTV, but I do hop on every once in a while and just take people's questions and have a conversation. But I was talking about the life coaching that I do, and people there had no idea I did life coaching. I think I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but it's not something I intentionally set out to do. It's just applications that were coming in for mentorship had nothing to do with mediumship or intuitive development. People were just hiring me to increase the quality of their lives, and I was incredibly touched by that. And so this is just an example of what a coaching call would sound like. Though I will say I've only ever supported one person in a 3-month container when it came to launching their podcast. And that's what also sparked the, inspiration behind the Empowered Podcaster course. And so you will hear me mention it midway through this conversation. But if you were even a little bit interested in starting a podcast, this Empowered Podcaster course was actually built off of the 3 months that I had with one of my clients who hired me specifically to start a podcast. And so I created this incredible workbook. I've been told by some people who took the course that the workbook alone is worth double the course. And then a video series that accompanies you and walks you through the workbook. And it's something that I am incredibly proud of. It's a 3.5-hour experience. And it takes you from anywhere from healing your fears and resistances to even sharing your voice with the world, to getting clear on what you want to talk about and how much you actually have to say because you have a PhD in life. And then the last module is, of course, on all the technical know-how on how to record, edit, publish a podcast from beginning to end. It's literally beginning to end. And so if you have similar questions to what Melanie has within this, I would consider taking it. I'll link below. I didn't expect this to be like a promo type thing, but because I don't really do marketing like this, but I do see people out there with these very similar questions, and the Empowered Podcaster really answers it all. It literally does. And so it's only $144 Canadian. It does work out to be around, I think maybe like $111, I could say, American for my American people out there. And I'll even sneak in a little code that will save you a little bit of money that's going to be in the show notes. So if you are interested, it's really cool. But if not, it's still a really valuable conversation to listen to, because we do get to, we get a little bit clearer on what Melanie wants to do with her, with her knowledge and everything that she's experienced in her life. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Check out my Instagram if you're not already on there, because I will be asking people in my stories to volunteer to do mediumship mentorship sessions for the podcast to you. But you got to get on Instagram. That's the only place I'm taking people. So follow me on Squamish Medium. It's where I'm most active, and we'll have some fun. All right, enjoy the conversation. Hello, Melanie. You have to unmute yourself. There you go. How are you doing? There you go.
Unmuted now. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Yeah.
You know why? I know why.
Because your mic probably isn't.
My speaker wants to be the Yeti.
How are you doing? We finally get to meet.
We're Insta buddies.
We are Insta buddies. I know. So I'm really excited. You know, it's funny. I was just talking on my Instagram live about this, where I was like, I wanted to record this podcast episode and I chose not to because I'm trying to always tune into desire right now. And then what happened? But an opportunity that actually lit me up. I was like, she's smart. Because that got me a bit excited. So I was like, yes, let's just see how it goes. And I'm happy to have the conversation with you and help you in any way I can. So
I mean, what's interesting is like your whole thing is desire, right? Well, it's not just your desire. My desire is to make an impact. My desire is to help other people. My desire is to live in my truth, right? Like whatever, and sharing that truth and making a difference and helping people where and when I can and when it's appropriate without crossing boundaries, right? Without meddling. And there's that fine line, right? And sometimes you just gotta lay the seeds for people to find and pick up, and they'll find and pick it up when they're meant to. So
exactly. And if your desire rubs somebody else the wrong way, it just gives them an opportunity to look at their resistances on why they don't feel worthy of following their desires, right? So living our truth is helpful for everybody, the greater collective, truly it is. So yeah. All right. So let's just see where this goes. How can I serve you today?
Okay. So I think my first question is like most other people that are thinking about a podcast is like, why me? Who am I to say or even think that I could do a podcast? What do I have to say? Why should I? And then that'll lead into the rabbit hole of, well, aren't there enough podcasts already? Like, is the space getting cluttered? I can hear Gary Vee. He's like, no, do it. And I've been watching Gary Vee since like 2013, and he's definitely influenced my career. And I guess the vein of where I want to go with any podcast is just being of service in somehow. And sometimes, so I've got a few different thoughts of where I want to go with it, because it's like there's three parts of me. There's the real estate agent. There is the badass kind of, I've lived some life, right? And I might have some opinions about that. And then there's this spiritual side of Melanie that a lot of people don't, like, people that really know me know about it, but others don't. They just get caught up in the agent with the backbone that they call a bitch because I don't, I have boundaries, right? So
yeah.
That's a lot. Like, that's a lot to digest. But I think that a lot of other people can kind of understand where I'm coming from because they have the same questions. And then the other questions is like, how often, how much time does it take? Who are your guests? Like, because if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And so, like, and that's who I am. Like, almost every single week, I've been doing live open houses for my listings since 2017. And that was way before anyone was doing it. Now everyone is kind of doing it, but I'm still been doing it consistently and on Instagram when you were able to do lives on Instagram that whole time. So anyway, so there's the agent part of me that could share information, but there's also the agent that can share information about in my community about being a realtor. And then I also have this Discover Fort McMurray. You might be able to see it in the background. I have this hashtag I started called I Shop YMM, and I'm all about shopping local, all about so I've done I did 30 videos in 30 days in December on local businesses and how I love how did you get started and why Fort McMurray? And then why do you love Fort McMurray? And to be able to help the small business owners. Okay, I'm starting to see where I'm supposed to go as I'm just talking. But it's that I think you get it because that's what you do with your mentorship, right? When you see that spark and when someone when you teach them how to fish and they actually fish, and then they create the fleet of fisheries, you know what I mean? Like, so lots of questions though, right? Like, why did you start?
Let's go back to the very beginning. Just
Okay.
first thing that you said. So who am I? Right? Well, one thing, we'll get to the bottom of what market you actually want to speak to, because you have all these different passions. To me, it's screaming lifestyle brand, right? But we'll tune into that in a minute. But who are you? Well, we have to also understand that we're vibrational beings. And so when I first started the idea around a mediumship podcast, I was like, well, what do I have to say that Tony Stockwell hasn't said, or Anthony Maraca hasn't said, or Medium Fleur hasn't said? That they probably say it a lot better. They're technically way up the mediumship ladder than me. So the who am I? Well, one thing I've learned through podcasting is our voice carries a vibration. The words that we pick carry a vibration, and I say things differently with a different energy than anyone else does. And though I'm not for everybody, my voice, when it carries out into the world, into the ethers, it attracts people who are of a vibrational match to me. And so, though I'm not speaking to everybody, and I don't intend to, and I'm not vain enough to believe that I can, I do believe that the right people are going to pick up the energy frequencies that I'm exuding through podcasting, through the words I choose, through the voice, through the vibration of the voice, the power behind the voice. And I have a relatively small Instagram audience. It's only 4,000 people compared to a lot of my counterparts who are in the tens and multiple tens of thousands. But my business is just as busy, if not busy. So podcasting is not about reaching masses. It's about reaching your people through sharing your voice. And so even if you're saying the exact same thing as someone else, your voice, because the energy it carries, is going to land very differently to the right people.
Yeah, I totally get that, because I gravitate to some people. It's no different than why someone chooses me as a realtor as why they choose someone else. You know, like there's lots in town, and I really that resonates with me. You know, like perfect example, like what's his name? The German guy. I do, and people love him, and I don't know. I just
See, I've never liked Gary Vee. I've never been interested in his energy. When it comes to business, I love really feminine led people. I love Melanie Ann Layer. She's somebody who I'm really attracted to and working under now. And so, like, again, are they saying anything drastically different? No, but the words that they choose to message the same message will land with different people. So with podcasting, one of the biggest things to kind of overcome is just trust that your voice and the words that you choose are very different, and you're going to attract very different people. And so that doesn't put you into the same box as everyone. Is the business podcasting market huge? Is probably the biggest podcast market, right? Amy Porterfield, #1 podcast, is business focused. James Wedmore, right? Business focused. But I am still attracted to podcasts that are much lesser known. I like the Expanded podcast with these two women. And it's like, I don't resonate with James Wedmore anymore. I resonate with the Expanded girls. And it's because of the words that they choose and the voice that they have. So trust that. Just trust that the right people will find you through it. But, you know, I was really scared to podcast when I first started. Like, I recorded podcasts for 6 months. I deleted them all after I hit, finish. I was like, nope, not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. And then it actually took a physical illness. It took a nervous breakdown at my corporate job, and I was hospitalized. I was on a heart monitor. I kind of had a fuck it attitude. I was like, I'm not wasting any more time. And I published the 8 episodes I didn't delete. But I still had this experience where I was still too scared to tell people that I had a podcast. So I wasn't marketing it. So organically, only about 5 people a week were finding my podcast.
Right.
And then eventually I mentioned it into a story, and I just mentioned it in one story. And one of my biggest podcasting heroes, Natalie Wallstein, Soulshine Astrology, messaged me. She's like, you did not tell me you had a podcast. And I was like, I haven't told anyone I've had a podcast. And I felt so seen in that moment. And I started talking about it. And then it went to like 50 downloads a week, then 100. Now I get over 10,000 downloads a month. Just in a very, very niche, like my podcast is so niched,
Yeah.
right? Whereas if you end up venturing into the business marketing, or if you end up venturing into the lifestyle, it's definitely a bigger pool to swim in. But we got 7 billion people on this planet. I'm
Right.
like, there is no scarcity when it comes to audience. People can listen to my podcast and Teresa Computer's podcast and not compare us and not think hers is better than mine. They can enjoy them both equally, right? So you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so let
Yes.
me ask you a few questions then. So you have the small business, you have the love for Fort Mac, you have the, lifestyle kind of side of it, and the real estate. Like, who do you want to inspire through your podcast? Like, what do you want people to walk away from after they listen to you? How do you want them to feel? What do you want them to think about?
They can do it. That just came out, that they can do it too. That, or sometimes being seen and being able to relate with the struggle, to whatever struggle, on whatever sort of beingness, and or maybe that they are stuck now, but they can hear the story of someone that made it through and that make a difference for them. I mean, if it lands up, small business is small business, like across North America, you know what I mean? And how did this small business owner start, and what difference was it for them, and those sorts of things. So that's definitely a message that yeah, you can do it. Right now, that's Louise Hay's tagline, right? Like,
Okay. As long as you give people credit where you heard it from, you can say whatever you want to say. That's one thing you just have to do with integrity, which is where Rachel Hollis lost her career, right? It's like this total plagiarizing. But if you at least give credit to where you hear things, it's perfectly okay to say it.
Right. And okay. It doesn't once I decide to do it, I've done lots of videos already. I did my first 30 videos in 30 days in 2015. I've been doing videos since 2013. So I started I'm not afraid. I have amazing women resources that are so good and so fantastic, but I'm also very clear. I don't talk just to talk.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk, I've got something to say. And so I kind of pride myself on that, because there's some agents in town that are all about, you look at their Instagram feed, it's all selfies.
Right.
All selfies. Right. And I have no, my bullshit meter goes off. I am not a fake person. And and I think you get this too. You're not fake either. And it's so hard to be around. I have a real hard time being around fake people, but I have all the time in the world to help someone make their business better.
Yeah.
I have all the time in the world for that, because they don't know what to do. They're good at their business, but they're not good at, they don't take enough time. And I've heard this time and time again, you have to take time to work on your business as much as you work in your business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to plan things out. And there's easier ways to do things, like working smarter, not harder. And I did a tutorial for realtors about doing that, how I use the live open houses and how I get all this content out of that, right? So I can get 22 pieces of content from doing a live open house on Facebook and on Instagram. So it's I want to show people that it's not as hard as you think. And so you either have time or money. What can you do if you have either? And what to do once you get to those points of time in your life. I could feel my passion about that, helping business owners. And there is so I could see some of my videos having doing stuff like this, and then this becoming a podcast, right? So then I can do the video, I can do the podcast, I can do all those sorts of things. And it's just figuring out what's the name, and that sort of thing.
So my course, The Empowered Podcaster, right? It actually has all of this in it. It actually talks about multi-purposing your podcast content, niching down, looking at what you overcome in your life, because where you meet that pressure and problem and you found the solution, you can support other people in, and what your podcast name is going to be, what the description is going to be, healing the fear of being seen, what are the resistances, all this is definitely in the course, plus the technical side of it. But what I want to ask too is, because I want to rein you in just a little bit so that you can at least leave this session with a little bit more clarity on what you want to podcast about. You got all these different ideas, but I hear like business quite a few times. If you were to select a drop down menu of your podcast, it's spirituality, it's self-help, it's lifestyle, it's business. What would you pick? Because that is something that you have to do with podcasting.
Yeah, it is. I know what I'd like to do, but I feel like I'm not quite ready for that. And that's kind of the spiritual stuff.
It's just a limit story you can work through. What is it that you would want to put on there if there was no limitations?
If there was no limitations,
mm-hmm.
Business and being spiritual.
Okay, because you have subcategories. So if your top one is business, and then one of the subcategories is spirituality, I think that that's really good. So what are some of the podcasts out there that you think are doing that really well?
I don't know. I got to go listen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you listen to podcasts?
I have. Yeah, I have in the past. I've got a couple that I really like. Most of them have been real estate. I used to listen to Gary Vee all the time, but sometimes the episodes would be an hour long, and it's just like I don't have the patience to listen through all of that.
So let me ask you something else. So we're going to focus on business here just for a second. What are 3 things that you have overcome in your business that you can share from an experiential lens or just a teacher lens, and both are good, to other people?
Changing market, going from being like amazing to the next year cut in half. Hiring an assistant. And using video, right? Like using video and how video really made a difference in social media in my business.
So then you have these things that you can kind of talk about, because what you want to do when you consider serving an audience with information, and that's what we're doing, is getting really clear on what you have overcome in your experience, because people will be able to sense if you're not embodied in what you're talking about. That's how come I choose to podcast from an experiential lens. I only talk about the fears I have actually walked through. I don't talk about the fears I can't grasp or that sound good, right? It's like I can only talk about what I've been embodied in, because people will be able to tell in authenticity if you're just, and not accusing you of this, I'm just saying more generally, it's just if they know that you haven't walked through what you've talked about versus what you walked through. Because again, it's the energetics that are released out. So what we do in the course is really getting clear on what you have overcome in your life, whether it's related to business or not. Like, I've overcome addiction. I've had a near-death experience. I've, gone through grief. I've been divorced. I eloped. I've been a smoker. I quit smoking. I've put on weight. I've gained weight. I've had 2 children. So I look at all these different things that I've experienced in my life, and it all fits within mediumship, because I'm a brand. Like, Squamish Medium is not just a medium. I'm a life coach. I'm an end-of-life doula. I connect with angels. It all fits within that container. So it's really getting clear on what you've come through so that you can start formulating the podcast episodes. So you can start formulating, like, each one of those things could be weaved into like 10 different episodes. Right.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between embodied and not. So that's you want to get really clear on that so you can share it with the audience. You might actually find yourself going through this exercise and being like, dang, I actually have a lifestyle podcast here. Right.
I can see why people would be triggered not to stop, because as you're thinking, and I'm thinking back to some of the major things that I've overcome in my life, whether it's like sexual abuse as a child, being fired because I wasn't taking care of my own well-being, and then working so hard on myself to getting rehired by the same company. And I'm really proud of that kind of growth and that kind of, that sort of thing. So I can see why people just being that vulnerable. And what's interesting, by accident, I was posting on Darren Hardy, who does like, can't remember his books right now, but he, and I put in there like something about like overcoming, like having been fired, and it went on to my own main page. And I was like,
sorry, Mom.
Shit, right? But the response from people was just like, it was good. So I know that I have it in myself to kind of share at that level, but it's also like, do I want to be that seen? Like, I understand now when you say being seen. Now I really understand.
It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. And I will tell you, the number one thing I consistently hear, and I get fan mail for my podcast every day. The number one thing people consistently says is thank you for being vulnerable,
Mm.
right? Because, and that's why my business does so well, because I'm not afraid to be vulnerable. And my first mentor actually went out of her way to message me and saying, stop being so vulnerable. People are not going to want to work with you. Well, guess what? They're not my people. So
Yeah.
you'll have to think about who you want to attract. Who do you want to work with?
Yes.
Do you want to work with people who honor vulnerability, or do you want to work with people who are more caught up with the appearances? So what you want to attract is how you have to show up in the world. I get the best clients of how I show up because I'm not pretending to be anything I'm not.
Right.
And they accept me for what I am. I don't even have to do sales calls anymore because people hear it and then they're just like, I know who you are. I know what you sound like. I know what you stand for. Just where can I put a deposit down? That's a real benefit that I didn't even think would happen because of being super honest on the podcast. So, you know, you'll have to look at, do you admire people's vulnerability? Because there's also an energetic difference between like a dumping ground and being vulnerable. So energetically for me, I don't talk about things that I haven't quite transcended yet. I'm going through a lot right now. You won't hear it on the podcast for at least a year because or else I would be using my podcast as a dumping ground, right? An energetic and emotional dumping ground. I'm like, in a year, I'll have a full perspective on the how, what, when, where, why, and the lessons. And I'm going to be so vulnerable to share those lessons, but I'm not going to share it while I'm in it. Because that energy just gives people wanting to give you advice and counsel you. And I'm like, that's not what I'm looking for with my podcast. I'm looking to inspire people in an embodied story and experience. And that does require vulnerability, right? So if there's a resistance to vulnerability, like that is something to look at. And that's why, like in the podcast course, I'm talking about all the time. I'm like, podcasting was the number one tool I had to heal my stage fright, heal my vulnerability, heal my fear of being seen and heard, trust that I have something valuable to offer this world, right? It was the biggest healing tool I had in all my years. I got over so much shit through podcasting.
All right. Okay. I'm committed to doing this. Okay. Obviously I need to sign up for your course so that I can, you know, fail forward faster than backwards. And I'm not afraid to fail, right? Like I'm not I don't love it, obviously. But I've done like, this is where I really get to practice what I've been learning in the last while. Of like trusting the process. If something doesn't work out, like really, like I've been home for the last, tomorrow I'm out of COVID jail, right? Like I was deemed close contact. And so I'm negative, I'm fine. But I said, like I was a little mad at the beginning, but then I was like, okay, what do you got in store for me? Bring it. What's coming? What's good here? Why is this happening for me? What do I need? Did I need to slow down? Oh, my assistant realized she wants to get her license, which is going to create a whole load of freedom for the both of us. Financial freedom for her, some more time freedom for me. And, you know, so that's why it happened. Then it's so be it, right? So be it. So I get it now. I'm ready to come out of COVID jail though.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to give you just an idea that came to me as you're talking. So just say you have all these like multi-passions, right? But what you have overcome was finding time freedom, right? You can actually talk about time freedom and talk about how that played out in your real estate, talk about how that plays out for small business owners, talk about how that, you know, has spiritually impacted you. Like that one topic, you can weave in all your interests into a topic. So I don't want you to like think like, oh, this one's about real estate and this one's about small business. It's like, no, this is life. And this is how I have seen it play out in all the different things that I'm super passionate about. So it can all fit within one container. You just need to be very intentional with it. And the number one thing I tell people when creating the podcast in the second module of the course is getting really clear on how you want people to feel when they walk away, or else you're just talking to yourself, right? Like it's like this egoic experience, like people who just want to hear their voice. But if you have a clear intention with like my intention in my business brand is I want people to feel clear, confident, and connected. So everything that I create in my business, every podcast episode, every course, every offering is synced up to that clear, confident, and connected. Right. And so every podcast episode, I want people to feel confident, seen, clear, connected to their abilities. And that's what being vulnerable does. People are like, I can do this, which was one of your intentions early on. Knowing my story that I've gone through this, because my intention was to get other people clear, confident, connected. right? And that was the whole premise behind the episode. I'm getting validation day in, day out that that's exactly how people feel. So as long as you're super intentional with that, it will land with people.
Right.
And so all that's kind of laid out in the course too, getting really, really clear on that. Does that help?
Yes.
You feel excited about podcasting now?
Yeah, I am. I could see I have some work to do, but I think it'll be really helpful. I think the course will guide me in the way and deal with the roadblocks I can't see yet.
Right.
So what I don't know yet about the whole process.
Well, with the course too, you get a Facebook community. I have a pop-up group that's sitting there. You get to join it. If you have any live questions while you're doing it, there's tons of people who have launched their podcasts already. So it's not just me, but it's other people who are kind of like at the beginner level of doing it. So you're going to be like really supported like through the process. It's active, it's there. And I'm excited for you. And I think that it's going to be getting you like out in the world in a way that feels good, kind of merging and blending all the different interests that you have. And do you have any more questions?
No, I feel very full, and I'm unbelievably grateful for your time, your heart, your love, your energy, your knowledge, wisdom, and experience. I'm very, very grateful.
Of course. I'm so grateful that you kind of posed this opportunity. It was not something I ever thought of doing, but I was like, she's smart. I think you're a smart cookie. I think you're a smart cookie. I think that you're very intuitive. And so that will only do good things.
Love it.
All right, love. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. This is so amazing. So grateful. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Have a good day.
You too. Goodbye.
Bye, love. So there we have it, the conversation with Melanie. I hope you guys enjoyed this experience. Would love to hear what you thought, if you had any amazing takeaways, and if you yourself were even considering or drawn to starting your own podcast, do check out the Empowered Podcaster course. It's up on myspiritschool.com where I host all my online courses, and do check out the show notes if you want a little $22 gift code off the course total. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time on another episode of Spirit School.